You know, the only thing about discussing these Halloween films right now is that since it's still early in the year, we're not in the right season. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel and another installment in my Halloween review series where I review all the Halloween movies I haven't discussed yet in the lead up to Halloween Ends later this year. And today we're talking about Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. So before we begin, let me know in the comments what your thoughts on this movie were, if you already saw it, or if you were planning on seeing it, and make sure to hit that thumbs up button if you like these reviews, as it helps me out immensely by getting my content out there. And if you're new here, I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with more movie-related content like more of these Halloween reviews on a near daily basis. But let's not waste any more time and let's talk about Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. This sees kids all over America want Silver Shamrock masks for Halloween, but Doctor Daniel Challis, played by Tom Atkins, seeks to uncover a plot by Silver Shamrock owner Conal Cochran. So, as I've done with my other reviews in this series, this will get into spoiler territory. So, if you haven't seen Halloween 3, Season of the Witch by now, and you wish to know nothing, this is your spoiler warning. Go watch the movie, then come back to this. But now that you've been warned, here we go. This is written and directed by Tommy Lee Wallace, and we've now reached the red-headed stepchild of the Halloween series. This is the only entry in this franchise to not feature Michael Myers. For those who aren't aware of what the original plan for this series was, after Halloween 2, it was decided to put Michael to rest. And John Carpenter and Deborah Hill, who returned in just a producer role for this, wanted Halloween to be an anthology series. It would have been each movie centered around a new set of characters that would take place on Halloween. Obviously that didn't happen, as this didn't exactly do great at the box office and reception at the time wasn't all that good, so eventually the series was reverted back to being about Michael Myers in Halloween 4, but we'll get to that in the next video. But over the years, this is the one Halloween film in particular that's been reevaluated the most, and it's now received a cult following as a standalone film. Now, for the longest time, I've heard from a lot of people that this is actually one of the best and most underrated of the Halloween sequels. That's almost always what I heard anytime it ever came up. Now, it's not to the point where it's now considered universally loved or anything, like it's one of the best horror movies of all time, but it certainly has its following. Though, having never really gone out of my way too much for horror sequels for the longest time, knowing how they usually decline in quality really bad, I just never got around to this one until now. And I have to say that, now that I have had the chance to check it out, I fall into the camp of those who actually quite enjoy this. Now, it's not perfect by any means, and I can see where the criticisms at the time came from, but honestly, it is a shame that we didn't get to see an anthology-style series like what Carpenter and Hill had initially wanted, especially given how I've heard some of these other sequels get, as it could have been a lot of fun, and that's the best way I'd describe this film. It's not exactly scary or anything particularly creepy. It's a departure from the slasher genre the series is known for, and it goes for more of a sci-fi, old B-movie inspired tone that you'd get out of cheesy monster movies from the 50s, but it's injected with all that 80s flair, with a visual aesthetic that just bleeds 1980s. And that certainly dates this a bit, I'm not gonna lie. Like, it certainly feels like a product of its time, but there are moments in which the film can feel so out there with this gonzo sensibility to it that I just had a good time watching it. There was especially a great use of practical effects, especially when it came to the more action-heavy scenes that made for a nice touch. And what's also nice is that, while this has considerably less involvement from John Carpenter, who, keep in mind, only ever directed the first movie and nothing beyond that, this still tries to maintain the same look as the original Halloween, even if it does contain some schlockier elements to it. That's one thing I have to commend a few of these sequels that I've seen so far, from Halloween 2 to the flashback sequences in Halloween Kills. This does a great job of having a visual aesthetic that feels reminiscent of the first Halloween, so that while it doesn't contain Michael Myers, it makes it feel as if it's within the same continuity. Plus, it does try to rely on its score at times to really immerse you within the atmosphere. Now, of course, we're not talking anything that's as iconic as Carpenter's original score, but Carpenter himself did at least return to score this, along with Alan Howarth, And they did a solid job with this synth-heavy score, as it really did help set the mood nicely. That is, with the exception of this one particularly annoying jingle, which unfortunately winds up being a central part of the film. Because Silver Shamrock, this novelty factory that plays a substantial role here, has a commercial for their Halloween masks, done in the style of London Bridges Falling Down. And it's used as a way to count down the amount of days till Halloween, so we hear it all throughout the film. Now, at first, it's kind of cute when you initially hear it, but believe me when I say, this becomes the definition of straight up aggravating. Like, not everything works about this movie, but this is the only part about it that doesn't work where I have just a straight up visceral reaction to it. And it's only because of how often you hear it. Believe me when I say, I wish I was exaggerating for the amount of times we constantly hear it throughout this, but I'm not. And because of that, that's definitely one element that brought the quality of the music, as well as the film as a whole, down. But going back to things I did enjoy, I didn't mind the characters here. Obviously, you don't have anyone as iconic as Laurie Strode, Michael Myers, or Dr. Loomis, but for who we instead follow, it's not a bad set of characters. Tom Atkins as Dr. Dan was fine enough. I've heard some people say he really isn't all that likable, as part of how he gets involved as deep in this conspiracy as he does is because of a woman he's interested in. And yeah, I'll admit that doesn't make for the most compelling character arc right there. But as he gets further involved in this conspiracy, I thought he was fine. While he's not exactly the most complex character or anything, Atkins was charismatic enough to keep the film constantly moving. So I enjoyed following him around for the most part, along with Stacey Nelkin as Ellie, who's the daughter of one of the men who dies at the beginning and winds up partnering up with Dr. Dan. I thought she was pretty solid as well. Again, neither character says or does anything that's quite as iconic as the characters most commonly associated with this franchise, but they were good here. And our main villain is Conal Cochran, played by Dan O'Herlihy, who might just be one of the better parts of this movie. If anything, a character like this is someone who plays most closely into the theme of the original Halloween that John Carpenter was looking to explore, which is the examination of evil. Now, not that anything new is particularly said on the subject, but this guy is straight up sadistic, and he's someone who doesn't have any complex, layered motivations. This is someone who's essentially evil just because. So it fits in line pretty much with the type of villain Michael Myers was in the original film, just with an added schlockier element to it, given O'Herlihy's performance and the nature of the material here compared to the original. But I thought it worked, and he was another memorable part of the film. I also like the storyline of this grand conspiracy within this small town, which included mysterious deaths and the involvement of Silver Shamrock and their jack-o'-lantern Halloween masks, which, by the way, makes it even more fitting it's called Halloween, as even though Michael Myers isn't involved, people with masks are still an integral part to the story. But I found the story of this big conspiracy and who's behind it to be fun and engaging for what it was. The film's filled with a lot of colorful imagery, and while it's all admittedly due to some dated looking special effects, like in one moment where we see this medallion shoot a laser beam at someone when they open it up, there's still a lot of flair on display here. And what's great is how it keeps upping the stakes and continuously gets more out there. I think that was what ultimately kept me invested. As Tom Atkins' character begins uncovering more details regarding who's behind all these suspicious events, we get introduced to concepts like androids, mind-controlling microchips, swarms of insects and snakes, and even these wild ancient rituals. Like, it gets out there. Now, it's not a twisty, turn-filled thrill ride through and through. It admittedly does feel a bit uneven, as in between some of these more surrealist moments, it can feel a little dry, with some of the conversations among our characters feeling a little stale. But while these moments can throw off the pacing a bit at times, when this movie gets right back into things, it had me hooked. And what's interesting about this too is that while it has a lot of that 80s schlock and it can feel pretty cheesy at times, it isn't exactly what I'd call the most lighthearted of all the Halloween movies, especially since most of those who wear these jack-o'-lantern masks are younger kids. Like, the Michael Myers movies focused on Michael going after teenagers and young adults, but the targets here are specifically children, as they're the ones who primarily wear the masks. And not only do we just touch upon some brutal subject matter, but the film winds up doubling and tripling down on it once we get to the ending, which I imagine is probably one of the biggest downer endings in this entire series. And this is a franchise that's centered around Michael Myers always coming back. But it ends with Cochrane orchestrating numerous broadcast signals being sent out with this commercial that would activate the masks all over as part of this ritual. And even though he gets killed and Dan's able to stop some of the broadcast signals, one still gets out, and the screen fades out as Dan pleads for the signal to stop. And that's just brutal. And for some, maybe that won't be the most emotionally satisfying ending for you, with the way it just cuts out and ends on a pretty depressing note, and I understand that. But for me, I think it worked for what it was. It's definitely a bit of a shock that it ended the way it did, but given that the first movie set the stage for this franchise with its infamous cliffhanger ending, and you kind of know to expect stuff like that in the same vein with these other installments, whether or not it's actually about Michael, because of that ultimately caused me to not be bothered by this ending so much. Halloween 3 most certainly won't be for everyone, but there's plenty to see regarding why it obtained its cult following. It's certainly one of the most out there installments in the franchise so far, with a schlocky B-movie sci-fi element to it that makes it a considerable amount of fun. It can certainly be uneven at times, and it can be dated with its very distinct 80s aesthetic, but for the most part, I thought it was a good time, and if you haven't seen this one yet, I'd recommend giving it a shot. Halloween 3 Season of the Witch gets a 7 out of 10. So stay tuned, because we'll be back in Michael Myers territory, as up next in this series will be my review of Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. But in the meantime, let me know, did you see Halloween 3, or are you planning to see it, and what are your thoughts? Do you think this is one of the better Halloween movies, one of the worst Halloween movies? Should they have gone the way of the anthology style? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and share it. And for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching, everyone, and keep having fun with film.